My sister reappeared with her rich fiancé, and my dad gave her the family business, which was meant for me as a welcome gesture, but now my father is calling me from the hospital, regretful. I, 36-year-old woman, was kicked out of my father's business 8 months ago. To give some context, I had been part of the family business for almost 12 years. We have a jewelry store that was started by my paternal grandfather. It was then passed down to my father, and after that, I expected it to be my turn. After all, I am the older sister, and I had always had a strong interest in the business since I was a teenager. My dad always told me that he expected me to take over the business eventually, because my 33-year-old sister didn't seem interested in having a career. She just wanted to get married and have a family. So, if there was going to be an heir to the business, it was going to be me. That had always been the assumption. There was no formal documentation about it, but I guess I should have arranged something like that. Because I had been my dad's personal assistant for 12 years, I even left my first job after only 2 years of working there, since I didn't want to seem entitled and wanted to gain some genuine work experience on my own before working with my father. But I left because my dad wanted me to start working with him. Despite everything I had done, I was still thrown out of the business in favor of my sister and her ridiculously rich fiancé. She hadn't even been part of the family for the last 15 years, as she had made some really bad decisions, and my parents decided to cut her off from the family right after she turned 18. She announced that she wouldn't be going to college and wanted to explore and find herself. This didn't sit well with my parents, and they told her she would either go off to college or she could leave. They gave her an ultimatum, and she, being the kind of person she is, decided to leave and move in with her then boyfriend. They didn't last long and broke up within 6 months. Then, she showed up at our doorstep once again, asking to be accepted back into the family. Before leaving, she had said some really horrible things to my parents, like that she didn't need them anymore, that she would be better off without a family like this, and that they weren't even good enough for her because her boyfriend and his family were financially better off than we were. She had really looked down on us and completely insulted and humiliated us before leaving. When she came back, my dad told her that the same conditions he had set last time still stood. Now, she had to agree to go to college and get a degree, any degree, it didn't matter which one, or she could just stay out. My sister tried to argue and fight her way back into the family, but my dad was pretty firm. Once again, she had to leave, and this time, she said she would never come back. For the next 15 years, we only saw her at family events, but never at any other time. Whenever there was a life update, we found out through other relatives because she refused to talk to us. My mom and I tried to contact her multiple times, but since we were still on good terms with my father, she refused to talk to us as well. I have to say she was really proud and stuck to her words. She never came back until my dad tried to reach out to her himself. Somehow, she figured out her life on her own, though not in the way I would have expected. As she had promised, she didn't go to college because she simply wasn't interested. However, for a few months, she lived with a friend and then got a job, starting to work to fund the life she wanted. I think that was actually pretty good for her. She switched jobs quite frequently, but in recent years, she had been working at an advertising agency. My family knew all this about her because she stayed in touch with the rest of our family, and our relatives kept us updated. She knew it too. About a year ago, my dad got seriously ill, and we almost thought we would lose him because he had major heart problems. The cardiologist told us things didn't look good for him unless he made some serious lifestyle changes. During that time, when he thought it might be the end, my dad finally decided to reach out to my sister and put an end to their differences. Since my sister had matured considerably over the past 15 years, she finally decided to come back and be part of the family again. The day she visited us, she came alone, and we didn't talk much about her life because we were busy reminiscing about the past. She didn't want to make it all about her, so she didn't tell us much about everything else she had been doing. The information we didn't get from our relatives, we knew professionally. We just didn't know anything about her personal life. Anyway, she seemed happy to be back, and we were all focused on the reconciliation between father and daughter. It was a very emotional reunion, and at that moment, I was happy for it all, not knowing what was going to happen next. When she visited us for the second time, she brought her fiancé, which surprised us all. She told us that she had been dating him for the last 3 years and that they had recently gotten engaged. No one else in the family knew, which was why we hadn't found out, because they had kept it secret. The flow of information wasn't just from her to us. She had also known, thanks to our relatives, that our father was having health complications. However, she didn't know exactly how serious it was, which was why she hadn't come to visit us. She had thought it wasn't appropriate to announce the engagement at that time, so she kept it private. But now, she believed it was time to introduce him to the family, so she brought him along. He seemed like a good guy, and I could tell he was financially well off because his clothes, watch, and shoes were all expensive. I was happy for my sister because I felt like she had finally found the kind of person she wanted to be with, someone financially stable, who knew what they wanted in life, and who had their future secured. After talking to both of them, we found out that her fiancé, like her first boyfriend, was also the son of a very wealthy man who owned his own chain of fast food restaurants. But unlike her first boyfriend, this guy seemed genuinely interested in her, and we could see that they were truly in love. I was genuinely happy for her, and I remember congratulating both of them. I never thought my father or even my sister and her fiancé would do what they did, but after knowing them for only about 3 weeks, my father suddenly decided that it would be best for them to take over our business as well. One morning, he simply called me and told me he wanted me to come home because he needed to talk to me about something. I was at work at the time since I had been the one managing everything ever since my father's heart health declined, and I was basically running the business at that point. He just hadn't officially retired yet, but I knew it would happen at some point. At that time, I was sure I was next in line to take over and take control of our business. But that day changed everything, and suddenly, my sister and her fiancé were the ones in line to take over the business I had always cared for. When I went to my parents' house that day, my sister and her fiancé weren't there, but my parents were, and they looked quite serious. After some small talk, my dad finally dropped the devastating news. I honestly thought he was joking about it, but when I realized he was serious, I just couldn't believe it. When I asked him why he would make such a decision after only 3 weeks of knowing this guy, he said he had his reasons and refused to tell me. But after a considerable amount of arguing, he finally told me that the reason he was handing the business over to my sister and her fiancé instead of me, as he had promised, was because he believed they would be more capable than I was. The cherry on top was that he thought this could be a welcome gift for the two of them back into the family, as they were about to start a new chapter in their lives by getting married in a couple of months. They believed this could be their wedding gift. I tried to convince him that this was a terrible idea because a wedding gift didn't need to be as big as an entire business. Just because the guy seemed wealthy, and besides, my father had always made me believe that I would be the one to inherit it when he eventually retired. I had built my whole life around this fact, and suddenly, he was taking it away from me to give it to people who had nothing to do with us for the past 15 years. I tried to tell him that maybe he could make us partners in the business and attempted to negotiate with him because this was my future we were talking about. But my father was quite firm in what he believed and said he was going to let them take over because he thought it would be in better hands since my sister's fiancé's father had already built something of his own and he knew they could expand our jewelry business twice as fast as I could. I begged him for a chance, but he simply wasn't willing to listen to me. He literally broke my heart that day. I wasn't just upset because I was losing something so big, but mostly because I had dedicated 12 years of my life to this only to get nothing in return. I hadn't even earned my father's respect, because if he had any respect for the kind of work and effort I had put into the business, he wouldn't have thrown me out. That was the day I decided to cut all ties with my family, because I simply had nothing more to say to them. I had hoped that my sister would at least fight for me, but she also disappointed me because they happily accepted their so-called wedding gift, which was my life's work. My sister had always known that I wanted to take over our family business once my dad retired. I had literally been talking about it non-stop since I was 13 years old, and my whole life had been leading up to this. So it wasn't like she didn't know that by accepting the wedding gift, she was accepting my dreams and making them her own. She made a post about it on social media to thank our parents for it, and with that, she announced her engagement. After that, no one in the family even bothered to reach out to me, and I think that was the most painful part of all, the fact that they didn't even seem to care about me. The day I left my father's house after that argument, they stopped talking to me. And I felt like I had been used and that 12 years of my life had been a complete waste. I was grateful to have enough savings to support myself, and for a couple of months, I could afford to do nothing and just try to put my life back together because I felt like everything had fallen apart. That was 8 months ago, and after that, I started therapy because I could tell I was falling into a depression that needed to be addressed immediately, or else I don't know what I would have done. I felt really bad seeing all the posts my sister was sharing, so I had to block her. I also had to tell my relatives that I was no longer in contact with them and that I didn't want to hear anything about them. I literally asked them not to tell me anything about what my family was doing, no matter how big it seemed, because I didn't think I wanted to know anything about it. They respected that and kept everything a secret from me. So I had no idea that over the past few months, my dad's health had been steadily declining and that my sister and her fiancé didn't care at all. It wasn't until a week ago that I found out about all of this when I got a call from my dad. He told me he was in the hospital because he had suffered a heart attack in the middle of the night and wanted me to come see him. I had blocked his phone number, so he had to use someone else's phone to call me. Honestly, I felt super guilty about that, but then I remembered what he had done to me 8 months ago, and I felt less guilty. Anyway, once he called me and told me he was suffering, I said I would be there to see him. So I dropped everything and went to the hospital to see him. My mother and father were there, but to my surprise, neither my sister nor her fiancé were anywhere to be seen. I found it quite confusing because as far as I knew they were very close, given that they were running the family business. I couldn't help myself and ended up asking about my sister and her fiancé's whereabouts as soon as I entered the hospital room. My father told me, with great disappointment, that apparently my sister was too busy to come see him, and the same went for her fiancé. I found that shocking because, as someone who had been running the business for 12 years, I knew it was lucrative and practically ran itself. Unless there was some major crisis to handle, we didn't have to be present at our workplace all the time. At least, that's how it was when I used to run things. I can't say anything about how it is now. Anyway, when my dad told me they were too busy to come see him, I asked if they had come down to the hospital at all since he had the heart attack. He told me they hadn't. He had called them, but they had only texted back, saying they were too busy and would come see him once he was discharged. These details were really shocking to me, and I guess my dad realized he had made a huge mistake in handing over the business to my sister and her fiancé. So he told me that was actually one of the main reasons he had called me, to apologize for what he had done. He told me he felt really guilty and regretful for kicking me out of the business despite all my work and effort, but now he wanted to make things right with me and invite me back into the family and the business. He told me what had happened, how my sister and her fiancé not showing up at the hospital made him realize that they didn't care about him the same way he had cared for them. He also told me that this wasn't the first time they had refused to show up for him. Over the past few months they had been somewhat distant. He said that after he had handed the business over to them, they started visiting him less and less. Before, they would visit him every other day to check on him and see how he was doing, but when his health started deteriorating initially, they didn't bother to go see him and always said they were too busy with work. This wasn't something he believed because both he and I knew that no one was so busy that they couldn't take an hour out of their day, especially since they lived just a few blocks from my parents' house. Anyway, he never said anything about it, but now they had crossed the line, and my dad could no longer tolerate this kind of disrespect. He wanted to take back his company and give it to the person who truly deserved it. We had a discussion about it in the hospital room, and then he invited me to rejoin the business. I was thrilled. He apologized for everything, and although I haven't completely gotten over it, I forgave him in that moment because to me, nothing was more important than getting back what I deserved. If I had to forgive my father to get it, I was willing to do so. But the problem now is that he also had this conversation with my sister. He told her that he wanted her to step aside because he had finally realized that even though he had always taken care of his daughter, she had never been there for him, and he could no longer tolerate this kind of disrespect. So he was asking to take back his company and give it to the person who truly deserved it, and they could take care of themselves. Unsurprisingly, my sister is upset, and for some reason, she thinks I'm to blame for this. She called me this morning and really went off on me, telling me that I'm a horrible person and that she can't believe I'm doing something so cruel to her. I don't even understand why she's so mad about this. I feel like there's something we don't know. Anyway, she's acting like she lost everything, and it's all my fault. But honestly, I think it's her own fault for not visiting our dad in the hospital. I mean, a heart attack is a big deal, and she could have taken time off work to go see him. She was the selfish one, and now she was getting what she truly deserved from the start. 8 months ago, she had absolutely no problem accepting a gift she knew she didn't deserve. So why should I turn my back on something I actually do deserve? Now I'm wondering if I'm the bad guy because clearly every time something happens, I have to take the blame and I'm really tired of it. Am I wrong for allowing my father to ask my sister and her fiancé to leave the family business so I can take it over? Update 1. Thank you all so much for the response to my post. I kind of knew I didn't deserve the criticism I got from my sister, but hearing it from you all just made me believe it even more. If even strangers who don't know anything about our lives think I deserve the business, then I have nothing more to say in my defense, and I even believe I don't need to. It's been a few days since my last conversation with my sister, and so far I haven't heard from her again. She hasn't blocked me anywhere, so that's a good sign. But I just have this feeling that there's more to this than she's telling us because I don't think someone with a rich fiancé would act like this over losing our business. I can't say for sure, but I have a theory that maybe things aren't what they seem with her fiancé. Some of you asked about this in the comments on my original post, but I didn't say anything about it because I didn't think it was relevant at the time. But now I don't think my sister's fiancé and his family are financially stable. From what I've heard, his father's company has been facing loss after loss, and they haven't been able to recover for the past year or so. I think this was their way of infiltrating our family business, and then eventually taking control. I haven't been able to understand why exactly my sister acted the way she did when she found out that I was being asked to return to the family business and she was being asked to leave. If she has a rich fiancé who has his own company, she has nothing to worry about, and yet she was devastated. Something just didn't add up, and I think soon she's going to come forward and tell us what's really going on. Anyway, we're lucky that my father didn't sign any documents or contracts and didn't officially hand over the business to my sister and her fiancé, because that would have caused us a lot of trouble. He was still the CEO. They were just working under him in the position I previously held. He was training them so they could eventually take over, but now I don't think that's going to happen. I talked to my father, and he told me that my sister is very upset, but he can't afford to worry about that right now. His only priority is transferring everything to me, and then I can handle the rest. So that's what he's going to do. He's already talking to a lawyer and having the documents drafted so I can take over as soon as possible and make it official. I'm honestly really excited. I don't think my sister's dramatic outburst can ruin this for me at this point. Update 2. Hi, it's been a couple of weeks since my post here, and I just wanted to let you all know that I am officially the new CEO of my father's jewelry business. The transition is complete now, and I'm officially in charge, which feels so good to say. I knew this day was coming, but there were some delays in the process because of my sister. Speaking of her, she is absolutely not happy about any of this, and I guess I can finally say it now. My theory about her was right. She and her fiancé were actually trying very sneakily to infiltrate our family business and take control so they would have something to fall back on when her fiancé's father's company eventually collapsed. It was my sister who planted the idea in my father's head to welcome them back into the family by handing over the business to her future husband, and unfortunately, he fell for it. I only found all of this out recently after reconnecting with my father. He told me that he wasn't thinking clearly. He was being greedy because, for some reason, he believed that a man from such an established business family would be better at running everything than I would. Originally, he had planned to keep me in the position I'd been working in, but when I told him I wasn't interested in the business unless I got to be in charge, he lost his patience. And that led to these 8 months of absolute misery for both of us. Thankfully, he came to his senses just in time, and we were able to avoid a huge disaster, because right now, my sister's fiancé and his father's credibility in the market is absolutely zero. I had been hearing rumors about his father's company being on the verge of shutting down, but I hadn't believed it because I was sure my father would reach out to me if something like that was about to happen. And my father thought I would reach out to him if something of this magnitude was happening, so neither of us contacted each other, which was pretty foolish on our part. But anyway, now my sister herself has confessed what she was trying to do and has put her ego aside to talk to me. She reached out to me a couple of days ago, right before it was finalized that I would become the CEO, and told me that she and her fiancé desperately needed jobs because they weren't sure how many more days his father's company could survive. So now she was asking me for help. I told her I would think about it. I have no problem hiring them, it's just that I will never ever be able to trust them again because I knew what their original intentions were. So that's what is making me feel strange right now. I do want to help her, but at the same time, how can I hire people I don't trust? Anyway, I told her to give me some time, and so far she has agreed, but I don't know what I'm going to do. Update 3. Hi. So, I've decided not to hire my sister and her fiancé. I know this will probably make me seem really selfish to some people, but honestly, I just can't trust them. When my father offered them the opportunity to take over the company in the beginning, they accepted it and didn't even bother to contact me for the next 8 months. They had absolutely no compassion or empathy for anyone other than themselves, and I don't want people like that around me or working for me. So I had to tell my sister that I couldn't help her. Obviously, she didn't take it well. She showed up at my office the other day and made a scene, accusing me of being ruthless and selfish. She told me she regretted even letting me get the company back. I thought that was strange because she had nothing to do with it. It was my father's decision because he was the boss, and what he said went. It wasn't my decision, and now it's not her decision either. For her to act like she did me a huge favor was just ridiculous. I would have tolerated all of that, but that statement really bothered me. So I told her that she hadn't done me any favors, neither now nor before. She didn't seem to care about me, so it was pretty stupid of her to expect me to do the same for her. I politely asked her to leave, but she refused and kept yelling at me. She was completely underestimating me, so I decided to call the police and have her removed because I couldn't deal with this level of drama. I'm already busy enough with work, and I just don't need this right now. Once the police arrived, she didn't have much to say and just left. It's been a few days since then, and we haven't heard from her again, so I guess she's going to leave us alone. And even if she doesn't, I don't care because I'll get a restraining order against her. Update 4. Well, this update is partly to answer some comments and partly to share some things that have been happening with the company, or things that were actually happening. First of all, many people asked how I could forgive my father so easily, and the answer is that I didn't completely. Yes, we have a relationship, but it's not like before. Basically, this was the way for me to return to the company I had worked so hard for, going to college, taking another job to gain experience, and working in various positions within the business to learn everything I needed to know to run it. I could have let my pride take over and refused to have any contact with my father again, but then I would have been left with nothing. Now, at least, I have the documents proving that I am in charge of the business, and something like what I went through 8 months ago can't happen again. As for my personal relationship with my father, I'm not going to abandon him because at the end of the day, he's my father and he's very sick, but he's going to have to do a lot to earn my trust back. I don't want to be like my sister, who abandoned him once she got the business, but this is going to take time. Now, for the other part of the update, some employees and I had noticed some irregularities in the accounting records, so we hired an external firm to audit them. They have found some things, but they're still working, so once they're done, we'll have the final report. Update 5. We finally have the results of the audit, which showed that my sister and her fiancé had been diverting money into different accounts, which we assume were theirs. The amounts weren't very large individually, but in total, it was a significant sum. We have presented this information to the police, and now there is an ongoing investigation. Unfortunately, since it's an open investigation, I can't give many details, so that's all for now. If there's an update in a few months, I'll come back to share it.